Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I actually don't have much to say. I don't think that a chief economist who deals with macroeconomics is necessarily qualified to give any introductory remark for a panel on this topic. But I thought I should just take a couple of minutes and perhaps try to explain why we put this session together, and perhaps what we expect from the session, and frankly, from the whole annual meetings. So, but let me first thank the African Development Team. I don't see Celestino. She's been working day and night on this. We have a group of colleagues in the bank who have been working on the, here she walks in. I was just thanking you, so don't worry about anything else, Celestino. And also thank the panelists, most especially our two extraordinary designers, Pate O and Alfadi. I've been a great fan of your work since I was a kid, and just to have you here on stage, it's really an honor, and we are very, very privileged to have you here. I frankly didn't even expect you to be able to squeeze this into your program. I just also want to thank all the other panelists and my good friend and former UNIDO colleague, Ambassador Helen Hai, who's done and has been doing amazing work across Africa, and she's probably going to talk about that. So why did we come up with this idea of having a panel session on fashionomics? Well, I guess the most straightforward answer would be that in 2015, the African Development Bank developed this program, this idea, which a lot of people still think is counterintuitive. And I frankly don't know why, because in my opinion, it fits very much with everything the African Development Bank is trying to do, and I'm sure the conversations this afternoon will make that point clearer to anyone who may have doubt about this. One of my very senior colleagues asked me, because the official title of my job is Vice President for Economic Governance and Knowledge Management. And she said, well, you're in charge of knowledge. You're not in charge of social events. Why are you having a show on fashionomics? And I had to try to explain to her that this is really not about social events. Even though, by the way, there will be a very nice fashion show at the end of this session. So for those of you who are patient enough to stick around, you may have the luxury of actually visualizing some of the samples of the great work that Alfadi and Pateo have been doing. Now, for those of you who don't know these two people, frankly, you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in the fashion industry. Okay? Pateo, among other things, was the favorite designer for Nelson Mandela. The Nelson Mandela shirts are actually a creation of Pateo. And Alfadi is Alfadi. I remember when I was a student reading an interview of Kenzo, the famous global icon of fashion, and he was asked, among his peers, who are the people that he admired the most? And he mentioned Alfadi. I was a student. And that really struck me. It kind of validated something that I felt, because I always felt since I was a kid that Alfadi, Pateo, that the work that they do is the best in the business. But to hear Kenzo himself said that he admired them, that gave me a lot of validation. And I remember writing an article, which I'm going to find, in Jeune Afrique Économie, a very famous, well-known news magazine, more than 20 years ago, about what I would do if I were the president of Niger. For people who are from Niger in the room, you can relax. I'm not from Niger, so I would never qualify to run anyway. But I wrote a piece, an op-ed in Jeune Afrique Économie more than 20 years ago about what I would do if I were the president of Niger. And the idea was to get away from what I consider to be the trap of commodities, of minerals. Of course, as a macroeconomist, I like minerals, I like commodities, I like natural resources because it's a very relatively easy way to get foreign exchange, to get fiscal revenues from the government, and perhaps you can use them well and do good things. Many countries in the world have used revenues from minerals to do good things, especially in the Gulf countries, but also Canada and countries like that, Sweden certainly, and Norway, many others. So it's always good to have natural resources. But as you may know, Niger, and Alfadi is from Niger, its main commodity has been uranium for many, many years. But you also know that Niger, despite all of that, is still one of the poorest countries in terms of income per capita. So 20 years ago, I wrote this article in Jeune Afrique Économie, imagining myself as the president of Niger, and saying in that article, well, I would choose perhaps not to abandon uranium, but to really diversify the economy into something in which my country has comparative advantage. And I felt that, well, Niger also has one of the top fashion designers in the world. So I would use that particular industry, fashion, textile, and even garment, to have mass consumption, but not just in Niger, but in the world. So in that article, I said, well, for the president of Niger to spend a lot of time going around the world, trying to sell their uranium, or trying to have a little more foreign aid, may be quite difficult and painful and not necessarily rewarding. So I suggested in that article that the president of Niger should have a plan to create a lot of jobs around the fashion, the textile, and the garment industries. And that the plan should have a very strong marketing component. And I recommended in the article that the president should go to Hollywood and meet a couple of big celebrities in Hollywood and tell them the truth that as one of the so-called poorest countries in the world, he was sick and tired of the label and that he wanted to do something new and dignified. And that the only thing he would ask from these celebrities would not be money, but just to help him advertise for 1 month textile fashion production from Niger. And the idea, and I mentioned a couple of names at the time, Madonna was the biggest star. So I said, I'm sure Madonna would be very happy for 1 month during the summer to only wear Alfadi clothes and to advertise it. To say, well, for 1 month this year, I'm only wearing Alfadi. And I exhort all my fans in the world to go buy Alfadi. Right. And I felt that if there were a plan with a structured global value chain, production, so that, you bring money, you bring expertise, you bring equipment, and you organize the industry not only in Niamey, the capital city of Niger, but around the country, you would have a lot of people already getting jobs, getting involved, and that would be, I thought, a very dignified way of, claiming and reclaiming the place that a country like Niger should have on the face of the earth, beyond just selling uranium and still being classified as one of the poorest countries in the world. Of course, I don't know if the actual president of Niger ever read that piece, or maybe they thought it was probably another piece from a lunatic. So I'm glad that in May of 2017, we are back with this conversation. And I will probably stop here just by telling you that there are actually so many potential benefits to the development of the fashion, the textile, and the garment industries, because they combine the things that we have in Africa in abundance. First, these industries can absorb a lot of labor, especially the garment. We've seen that elsewhere, okay? And the great thing about it is that people in Africa actually love these industries. Even people with very low-level skills, in a few days, a few weeks of training, get involved. And then, second, they use their creativity to come up with things that fits what we want to wear, what we want to look. So, beside the labor absorption potential, you also have the fact that it links to culture. And I frankly don't see how we can have sustainable, strong, valid economic development if we don't link what we do to culture, to who we think we are or who we want to be. And the fashion industry, the garment industry, the textile industry really help us strengthen or advertise whatever culture we want to promote. And of course, there's creativity. You can say anything you want about the people of Africa, but you could never accuse them of lacking creativity. And with today's technological development, there are so many things that can be done, share in terms of designing, sharing views and ideas. So just one last sentence before I leave the stage, to say that in this beautiful country hosting us, India, well, you may or may not know that the textile and clothing industry is actually the second sector in terms of employment in India. So India has been already doing it. And as you know, there are many similarities between India and Africa, and the Indian people, the Indian culture, the richness, the richness of our civilization, the fact that we love clothing and creativity. So India is already showing the way, and 4% of GDP in India is actually coming from textile and clothing. So there are a lot of gains, potential gains there, and I hope that this panel will help us reflect on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Monga. I can see that my job as a moderator is in jeopardy there. Thank you very much, and for setting the tone for this discussion. We will begin, ladies and gentlemen, this discussion with a short video from one of our members of the panel. Actually, before I do that, let me just quickly introduce our panel so that you get to know them even as we are discussing. My far left is David Suddens. David is the CEO of Lisco Group. In his early career, David spent about 30 years in Europe's textile and clothing industry. He was the CEO of companies in the UK, France, and Germany, both public and private. Much of this period, we thought we should emphasize this, was spent restructuring businesses as textiles declined in Europe and moved to Asia. David then became involved in the turnaround industry and was named Turnaround Manager of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year, and Chief Executive of the Year. Welcome, David. Next to David is Nick Elam. He is the CEO of Pluxus Cotton Group. Since it launched in 1990, Pluxus Cotton, a cotton-producing, ginning, and merchandising company based in the UK, has rapidly grown into a global network of partnerships with an annual turnover approaching $500 million. Its influence and activities comprise farming, ginning, warehousing, logistics, and marketing operations. The group, through its overseas operations, employs approximately 2,000 people worldwide. Welcome, Nick. Next to Nick is Neelam Chiba, who is the co-founder of Mother Earth and Industry. Now, industry creates rural creative industry value chains through formation of producer companies and linking them to access to India's booming retail sector and global markets. Mother Earth, I thought I should emphasize here, is a lifestyle brand that represents Indian designs in a contemporary sense. Welcome, Neelam. We've heard so much about our next guest, and that is Mr. Al-Fadi. He's the African designer and UNESCO artist for peace. He's also known as the magician for the desert. He is a native of Mali, raised in Niger, and he was also knighted by the biggest designers, Yves Saint Laurent, Christian Lacroix, and Paco Rabanne. Who helped him to make his first steps into the fashion industry and also to reach an international fame. We'll talk about that later. Welcome, Monsieur Al-Fadi. Next to Al-Fadi is Ms. Helen Hai, and Helen is the CEO of Made in Africa Initiative. She's also a goodwill ambassador of UNIDO China. She's also the CEO of the Made of Africa, as I said, which advises African governments for industrialization and investment promotion. Ambassador Ha is a co-founder of C&H Garments, which is a pioneer, Pan-African export-oriented garments manufacturer. Welcome, Helen. And last but not least, our other designer, Monsieur Pateo. He is a fashion designer who the doctor has already alluded to with the famous Mandela shirts. He was born in Burkina Faso, raised, and he's also now based in Abidjan since 1969. And I think they should just adopt him. And he's been designing for the last 40 years. We're now going to let's get this conversation going. We think we've tackled a lot of that, so let's just get into this conversation. We'll start with you, Helen. Can we have your video? And then after that, I just want to talk about how fashion can enhance development in Africa. Can we have the video, please? Probably as we're waiting for the video. Are we ready? Yes? All right. I think we'll start the conversation. We'll wait for the video to come through later. We'll stop it when it comes. Helen, as an entrepreneur, policy advocate, and also UN Goodwill Ambassador, how do you think fashion can support Africa for its development?
Okay, that's a very good question. But let me ask the audience, have any of you bought clothes which said made in China? Please raise your hand if you never buy something clothes it said made in China. Okay. But did you know when you actually buy clothes said made in China, how many jobs it actually created? And do you know actually when you buy that, did you know actually how did you help China and Asia's economic transformation? And let me explain that to you. The year I was born in China, 1978, the GDP per capita in China is only $154. Which is less than 1/3 of the sub-Saharan African countries. So at that time, China actually is very poor. But then the economic transformation in China, it has been such a miracle in the past 40 years. And the GDP per capita in China in 2015 is 7,500. But most amazingly, did you know, 600 million people has been lifted out the international poverty line in China. And according to World Bank, the number of people living under the international poverty line in the world since 1960 didn't decline if we exclude the 600 million people in China. So what has been the success of China's economic transformation? Actually, it's something to do with fashion and also manufacturing. Because the secret of China's economic transformation is in the late 70s. They started the manufacturing, light manufacturing, and China was able to create millions of jobs through industrialization, and that is the jump start of economic transformation. That's why today, when we are seeing clothing, we are buying iPhones, actually, millions of people in China has been producing that, and that has been the secret for China's success. And that success is not alone for China. If we are looking at our human history in the past 60 years, when we talk about economic transformation, in 1960 to 2008, in the world, there's about 200 developing economies in the world. But actually, there's only 2 economies moved from lower income to higher income. That is South Korea and Taiwan. And China is likely to be the 3rd one by 2020. And there has only been 13 economies moved from middle income to higher income. Out of those 13 economies, 8 of them are in Europe. The other 5 are the Asia 4 tigers, plus Japan. And the secret of all those countries is because they started manufacturing sector by creating millions of jobs. And that is the jump start of those countries' economic transformation. And today you're probably wondering, can we really change made in China to made in Africa? And if we do that, what's the impact for Africa? And today I want to first share with you is, there is actually this golden opportunity for all of us if we help to change that made in China to made in Africa. Why? Because I just mentioned the GDP per capita in China in 2015 has already reached 7,500. By 2020, according to China's forecast, China is going to double that. That means by 2020, China is going to become a high-income country. And that also means 85 million jobs is in the process of relocating out of China. And out of those 85 million jobs, 20 million jobs actually are in garment and textile. And that's the reason, actually, if Africa are able to capture this round of golden opportunity, we know, actually, when people are buying clothes, we're actually going to create millions of jobs for the youth in this continent. And actually, in this video, you can see, I set up a factory in Rwanda and how we support it. We're not only creating jobs, we're also supported local designers to build their local brand. Please go ahead with the video.
Thank you very much, Helen. You've come up with very alarming figures there. So we'll watch the video, and then after that, we'll see if actually this can really work, in Africa. Could we have the video, please?
Sound.
It'd be nice to have sound, otherwise I would have to speak through entire 4 minutes. Is there any sound? Can we stop the video, and then when you're ready, we can start? We actually practiced this. We just wanted to make sure if you're awake, and you're paying attention. It's all part of the plan. Helen, you came up with a lot of alarming figures. Can this actually work in Africa, really?
The answer is definitely yes. So I would like also, the second thing that I share with you is, there is this industrialization movement has already started in the African continent. I came to Ethiopia back in 2011 to set up a shoe factory. At that time, nobody believed Ethiopia could become the manufacturing floor for the world. And also Ethiopia ranked 125, according to World Bank Doing Business report. In theory, it needs a lot of enablers before it can actually start its economic transformation to be able to taking the job relocation from China. But actually, I went there by the invitation of the Prime Minister, leader's willingness, and under his vision. I set up the first shoe factory there. It took me 3 months from the investment to actual production from Ethiopia to the US market. In the following 6 months, I doubled the export revenue in Ethiopia in the shoe sector. By the end of year 1, I recruited 2,000 local workers. By the end of year 2, I recruited 4,000 local workers. And Ethiopia government was also very empowered by this success. In 2003, they asked me to help them on investment promotion for the industrial zone. Before I came to Ethiopia, before 2011, they have industrial zones, but they have been struggling to find international manufacturers become a residence. But why I was helping government on the investment promotion in 2013, the government had the industrial zone called Bole Laming. They have 22 factory units, 8 of them are built, the rest of them are still on the plan. But it only took us less than 3 months without any international advertisement. All 22 factory units, all listed out to international manufacturers from China, India, Turkey, Bangladesh, all over the world. People ask us, how did you do it? Success brings success. We brought the international manufacturers in. We showed them the factory I created. Most importantly, I showed them the profit loss account, showed them there's money actually can be made in Africa. So they immediately signed the lease. And empowered by that success, Ethiopia government has been building another 4 industrial zones. And today I want to share with you the latest industrial zone has been built this year, called Havasa Industrial Zone. Next year is going to have to create 60,000 jobs and generating 1 billion export revenue. It's 100% for textile and garments. So it only took 6 years for Ethiopia from the map of nowhere for manufacturing to today becoming a great relocation place for the global relocation. So that can be done. And also in the video you can see, Rwanda is a small landlocked country. Nobody would believe Rwanda is ready to do manufacturing. We went there last year, set up the first garment factory, and we immediately recruiting more than 1,000 workers with less than a year. And also we're supporting local designers from South Africa. We're importing fabric from Ghana, produce them in Rwanda, and we sell it into the US through Net-a-Porter. And Beyonce is wearing that Africa brand.
Wow. Let me bring in Nick here. Let's focus on manufacturing. Now, substantial growth in African markets has transformed how business operates, requiring manufacturers really to think beyond production planning along with developing their value chains. What I want to know from you is how are changes in raw material and labor costs interrupting existing business models and creating new networks? How's that working?
Well, first I should say that we have in Africa built the first, from the seed all the way through to the finished goods, which we are exporting. So we've built the first full value chain in Uganda from the very beginning to the very end. And I don't know if you saw the article in The Economist last week, From Shrub to Shelf, which explained that situation. I'm totally with Helen. Textiles has industrialized the world. And it's the one industry which is going to change Africa phenomenally. I mean, it started with the British Industrial Revolution. It took 156 years, followed quickly by America and Europe. Hong Kong, Korea, Japan took 50 years. China, India, Pakistan took 35 years. Vietnam and Bangladesh have taken 20 years. Africa's time is now. And we have the opportunity now to create the most competitive, sustainable value chain in the world. Africa produces 1.5 million tons of raw cotton. Africa exports a net 85% of that raw cotton. We used to be involved in just exporting Uganda cotton. Uganda exports about $50 to $60 million worth of raw cotton every year. We're turning that $50 million worth of Uganda raw cotton exports into $750 million worth of finished goods. I noticed in the paper it said that 400,000 jobs would be created. A lot more than 400,000 jobs are going to be created. According to Active, 9 million jobs will be created. 9 million jobs with 7 dependents each is the population of Great Britain or Germany will be created by this industry. And that's forgetting about the agriculture. Our company supports 200,000 smallholder farmers with about 7 dependents each. And you put that across the whole value chain, the inclusive economic growth is absolutely phenomenal. But to understand why it's going to be the most competitive industry in the world, one needs to understand what's happened in the world of textiles over the last 10, 15 years. So Europe and America consume about $550 billion worth of apparel every year. China, India, and Southeast Asia consume about $320 billion worth of apparel every year. Over the next 10 years, Europe and America are going to move to about 700 billion, but China, India, and Southeast Asia are going to move to about 740 billion, more than double where they are today. What happened in 2004, I think it was, when China accessed the WTO, was that the multi-fiber agreement, which protected all the industry, the textile industries of the world by anti-dumping duties, was disbanded. And the textile industries moved to China, India, and Pakistan, and Asia. And the industries of America, Europe, and Africa were totally decimated. I used to make my living selling cotton to the Nigerian textile industry, and the Nigerian Textile Manufacturers Association was the biggest employer in the whole of Nigeria, more than the oil industry. But as you see that growth in Southeast Asia, and the industries are in India, China, and Southeast Asia, you are not going to have the supply chain that you need to supply Africa, which is going to be 25% of the world's population and 40% of the world's children, and has very little textile industry to speak of. What we see in our industry today is that the people that are in India and China are going to become more and more expensive. China today, a textile worker is over $700 a month. Today in Africa, the wages are extremely competitive. When you take the raw material, which is 15% cheaper than India or China, when you take a vertically integrated supply chain, we are spinning, knitting, dyeing, finishing, making the garment all in one place, and you take the advantages of EPA, the European Partnership Agreement, and AGOA, which offers an 18 to 35% duty advantage, you are making Africa the most competitive supply chain in the world. And we are sustainably supporting our farmers. Africa has flatlined its agricultural growth since 1960. In 1960, Australia had exactly the same yield as Africa. Since 1960, the Australian yield for cotton has gone up by 15 times. Africa has huge opportunity, not only in the agriculture, not only in the manufacturing side, to be the most competitive, sustainable supply chain in the whole world over the next few years.
Thank you. Talking about opportunities and also finished goods, I'd like to bring into the conversation David. Your group is a leading company with strong African designs and branding. We all know about that. What is the role of Vlisco in supporting the development of African textile and fashion industry?
Okay, do you think I can have a microphone? I could shout. Could I have a microphone?
Yes. Could we have somebody pass on the microphone, please? Just pass it on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hold on. I think it's on. I'll answer the question. It's a shame, isn't it,
Helen and Nick are absolutely right that the world's developing economies always develop via the textile and clothing industry. And I've been here now for 24 hours, and I've sat in a lot of seminars and sessions. They've all been packed. And here, for this seminar, I'm glad that you are here, but there are not very many of us, are there? That is typical of the textile industry. Nobody really cares very much. And yet it has got such the powerful economic force that you've just heard about. Flisco operates in Africa already. We employ 1,500 people. We print 50 million yards of fabric. We have 34 retail stores. We buy only 15 million yards of fabric. In the next 5 to 10 years, I want to buy at least 50 million yards of fabric from Africa using African cotton. I want to open another 50 to 100 stores. I want to put up a third printing factory alongside the two that we've got, most probably in Nigeria. I want to continue to invest in training tailors. This year we're spending 75,000 euros helping to train tailors in Nigeria. I want to continue to train tailors right across the West and Central African region. And more importantly, I then want to find employment for them, either self-employment, because we will help them to link with our consumers who need tailors through an app that we've produced called a tailor locator, or by working with local governments to put these trained tailors to work, making for local requirements. So those are my plans for the next 5 to 10 years. I will need new investors. I will need finance to make that happen.
We'll talk about the financing later. The AFDB are right here, so we'll get to financing later. I'm glad that you localized the conversation to Nigeria, because you are aware that Nigeria is on a campaign or a directive to revitalize its textile sector, acknowledging the job creation impact. I just wanted you to elaborate, if you can, how you are working, how Flisco is working and supporting African governments, such as Nigeria, where you've alluded to, in revitalizing this sector.
Yeah, life is full of problems. So in 2015, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Nigerian government to help develop the Nigerian cotton supply chain and textile industry. And in exchange for that, we were hoping to have easier access for our Dutch printed wax, which we still print in Holland, directly into the Nigerian market. So that was in the early part of 2015. By autumn 2015, the Flisco Group had its own financial crisis and its own change of leadership. So it's not just countries that do that, folks, it's companies as well. And that's taken me 18 months to sort out, but it is now sorted out. And so now we can look at growth again.
Let's talk to the designers now. Monsieur Pateo, you are famous for the Mandela shirts. From your perspective, what is the current state of Africa's textile and fashion industry? How is it positioned on the global scene?
Bon, mais sinon en Afrique, je dirais que le textile, le positionnement, pour le moment l'Afrique n'a pas une position assez solide. Pour une simple raison, je parle de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, où je vis, où je suis. La mode, je suis la mode depuis des années. Mais le problème que nous avons en Afrique Bon, je dirais que le souci qu'on a en Afrique de l'Ouest, c'est que jusque-là, nous ne parlons pas de positionnement d'abord, parce que d'abord, nous sommes encore des créateurs de mode. Alors qu'on parle maintenant de l'industrie. Pour passer de la mode à l'industrie, il faudra beaucoup de choses. Il faut d'abord la formation des gens. Il faut que les gens soient bien formés. Il faut créer la structure aussi de production. Ensuite, maintenant, la matière. C'est ce qu'on n'a pas. D'abord, on n'a pas vraiment beaucoup de gens bien formés. On n'a pas la structure, c'est-à-dire les nouveaux matériaux de travail. Et nous n'avons pas aussi de la matière. Quand vous allez sur le marché africain, vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'avoir du coton. C'est-à-dire le coton même qui est la vraie base même de notre travail, on n'a pas du coup vrai coton. Tout ce coton qui est produit en Afrique est parti dès la cueillette. Donc, il nous revient seulement des couches de coton. Donc, nous, on a beaucoup de difficultés avoir du coton pour travailler. Donc, il y a des talents en Afrique, il y a les possibilités, il y a des créateurs très connus, mais il reste encore du travail de sur-mesure et puis à un stade encore assez très restreint. Alors que pour passer de la mode à l'industrie textile, il faudra qu'on crée effectivement cette façon de faire qui est de créer des emplois en formant beaucoup de gens, en créant des structures modernes, ensuite aussi de la matière, que la matière soit disponible pour nous. Les vrais problèmes qu'on rencontre en Afrique pour la mode, c'est ceci. Voilà.
Thank you. You've talked about opportunities, Monsieur Patel. You rose to success and to fame through the branding of the iconic Nelson Mandela Madiba Tata. But what I want to know from you, how can just a simple person in a city like Lusaka get to international stardom?
Il faut croire à ce qu'on fait et c'est beaucoup de travail, effectivement. C'est la création, c'est beaucoup de recherche. C'est vrai, jusque-là, le temps que nous avons mis pour arriver à ces stades, c'est assez long. Alors qu'on aurait pu faire moins de temps que ça parce que il faut travailler avec des gens qu'on forme d'abord. Ensuite, on n'a pas aussi la structure adéquate pour pouvoir arriver à une performance aussi rapidement. Il faut dire que en Afrique, il y a la mode et puis il y a l'industrie. La mode, c'est ce que nous faisons, c'est-à-dire c'est des créations. Mais il faut aussi savoir que cette mode que nous faisons est à un niveau encore beaucoup très bas. Il faudra que nous arrivions à créer l'engouement parce qu'il y a l'engouement vers ce métier. Ceux qui m'ont devancé ont déjà parlé de l'industrie de la mode, les possibilités qu'il y a en Afrique. Effectivement, il y a beaucoup de possibilités, mais ces possibilités-là, il faudra qu'on les crée, qu'on crée d'abord la formation. C'est très important que nous arrivions à créer la formation, à former des gens. Ensuite, après la formation, il faudrait aussi qu'on ait la structure réelle pour pouvoir entrer en compétition avec les autres. Ensuite, maintenant, la matière elle-même. Nous avons travaillé, effectivement, parce que vous savez, quand vous êtes un créateur de mode, le vêtement, c'est comme un messager. Quand vous créez des modèles, alors il est partout, il est vu. Et c'est à partir de là que notre célébrité est venue. On a aujourd'hui à peu près une quinzaine de boutiques à travers l'Afrique, mais tout ça est fait à partir de création, on va dire, de recherche de matières de création. Mais si nous voulons passer de création simple à l'industrialisation, nous sommes obligés de passer aussi à ces secteurs de formation des jeunes gens, ensuite la création aussi des structures, ensuite maintenant la recherche de matières. C'est très important pour nous. Voilà.
Thank you very much. I also rope in Alpha D here. You also rose to success because you were endorsed by all these iconic brands, which others don't have. They don't have that opportunity. Now, from your experience, what are the just give me three key factors that emerging fashion brands require to reach that export potential, so that we can have that made in Africa growth brand? Because let me just elaborate here a little bit, if you allow me. I know from where I'm coming from, if I buy something made in Zambia, it is perceived to be either I'm a miser or the product is inferior. So how do we get to embrace that?
Merci beaucoup, c'est très gentil de m'avoir invité déjà. Je voudrais remercier M. Célestin, je crois que je remercie la BAD, de penser réellement à ce panel d'industrie culturelle, de la mode, et de faire venir des grands comme Vlisco ou comme Madame qui est arrivée par rapport à cette industrie de la Chine, qui est basée aujourd'hui au niveau de Kenya et au niveau de l'Éthiopie. C'est une chose qui nous touche parce qu'en fin de compte, ça fait 40 ans qu'on se bat, que je me bats par rapport à la mode africaine, pour donner une dignité à la création africaine. Comme M. Célestin le disait tout à l'heure au micro, j'ai confondu l'uranium du Niger à la création. Je me suis dit, le Niger exporte l'uranium pendant 60 ans aujourd'hui pour donner une dignité à l'uranium. Mais la mode peut apporter plus que l'uranium parce qu'on peut créer des millions d'emplois dans ce domaine de la création au niveau du Niger, au niveau du Mali, au niveau des pays d'où je sors. J'avoue que j'étais frustré pendant plusieurs années. Pendant 20 ans, je faisais ma création. Je travaillais partout. J'ai eu des Oscars à travers le monde, à Paris, à New York. Parce que moi, je ne me suis pas limité uniquement à m'arrêter uniquement au Niger. Je suis allé à New York. J'ai ouvert des boutiques à New York, à Paris. J'ai ouvert une vingtaine de boutiques sur le continent, c'est vrai. Mais j'ai été frustré en voyant que notre parole ne porte pas. Parce que nos politiques africaines et les industries et même les financiers ne pensaient pas réellement que nous, créateurs, peuvent être aidés ou appuyés, ou les banques d'ailleurs. On travaille seul, on est les créateurs, on est les financiers, on est les producteurs, on est les distributeurs, on est les communicateurs nous-mêmes. Et c'est des choses qu'aujourd'hui qu'il faut absolument changer. Et c'est pour ça qu'en 1998, j'ai créé le premier festival de mode africaine qu'on appelle le FIMA. Ce film a été créé dans le désert du Niger où il a réuni chaque année plus de 8000 personnes qui viennent à travers le monde, plus de 50 couturiers africains, internationaux, d'où, là où d'ailleurs j'ai rencontré Kenzo, j'ai rencontré Yves Saint-Laurent, tous les grands créateurs aussi européens sont venus pour apporter leur contribution par rapport à la mode africaine. C'est vous dire que la mode africaine a une chance, parce qu'on est des créateurs, on a une image, on a un sens de la création, on a quelque chose que personne n'a au monde, on a un continent, dans chaque pays, on a différentes manières de nous habiller. Dans chaque ville, on a différentes manières de parler. Notre motif africain, notre image africaine a un savoir-faire ancestral qu'on peut exploiter et moderniser. Donc c'est pour ça que je crois réellement que l'image qu'on a aujourd'hui du coton africain, nous voulons absolument que le coton soit travaillé sur place, localement pour créer plus d'emplois. Nous voulons collaborer aussi avec des grosses institutions qui sont sur place, avoir des partenaires qui pourront réellement rehausser l'image des créateurs africains en basant leur structure africaine, en créant plus d'emplois et en utilisant aussi notre image. On a des noms qui sont vendus, qui sont aimés, parce qu'on a habillé les plus grands de ce monde. Moi, j'ai habillé beaucoup de présidents africains, j'habille toujours beaucoup de premières dames africaines, j'habille des grands artistes, j'ai habillé Michael Jackson, j'ai habillé plein de gens. On ne dit pas des choses, parce qu'en fin de compte, on est les créateurs avant tout, mais on a fait rêver des jeunes et des gens depuis une vingtaine d'années, et beaucoup de jeunes veulent être comme nous aujourd'hui. C'est pour ça que je suis en train de préparer aussi une des premières universités de la mode et des arts, qui est en train de se préparer au Niger, qui est en train de s'ouvrir. On a eu le terrain, on travaille pour la formation professionnelle de nos artistes et de nos artisans localement. Je suis aussi d'un pays où la création, la broderie, la teinture est une chose incroyable qui permet aussi de faire grandir notre image et nos noms. On est venu en Inde, ce n'est pas par hasard. L'Inde a aussi des potentialités énormes qu'on peut aussi collaborer entre l'Inde et l'Afrique. Donc la BAD...
Having said all that, sorry to cut you, having said all that, you talked about culture. You've also talked about financing. I know that women in Africa, when you look at culture, it's practically impossible for some of them to access, financing. It's even practically impossible for them to even relocate and go to Paris and go and pitch to Yves Saint Laurent if they have to. So, do you see any potential in employment for these women or for youths?
Nous avons formé dans nos ateliers des femmes, beaucoup de femmes. Mais je crois que dans nos pays, il faut le savoir aussi. La Côte d'Ivoire, au Niger ou au Mali, où on vit, ce sont des hommes qui font la couture. Ça, il faut le savoir. En Chine ou dans beaucoup de pays comme le Maroc, comme la Tunisie, ce sont des femmes qui travaillent. Nous sommes en train de former des femmes. On les forme aujourd'hui parce que la qualité du travail, la finition, la main-d'œuvre devient de plus en plus intéressante quand c'est les femmes qui le font. On mélange les deux, certains, mais les femmes ont beaucoup aujourd'hui de potentialité avec nous à être formées, à avoir aussi un travail de qualité dans ce que nous faisons. Mais nous travaillons sur l'image. Nous travaillons aussi sur la marque. Donc, d'où l'intérêt d'avoir des partenaires avec qui on travaille. Les femmes ont toute leur place avec nous pour essayer de grandir et de développer et de créer. Et aussi de créer de l'emploi par rapport à elles aussi.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nilam, we just want to bring you into this conversation as well as the co-founder of Mother Earth and Industries. And we've talked about financing, we've talked about the whole value chain, which you actually are a success story. Can you give us your experience as a leading entrepreneur in the creative manufacturing sector, starting from the challenges of accessing finance to support your business development, to connecting all the local artisans and entrepreneurs into the integrated markets?
Yeah. So I think I've come in at a very interesting spot because we've spoken about large textile industry. We've spoken about boutique textile industry. And so I think everything needs to be stepped, right? I have some interesting data here. 93% of India's workforce is in the informal sector. 93%. Just 7% of India's workforce is in the formal sector. I was at the World Economic Forum Davos last year at a session called Green is the New Black. When we are talking about fashion, please consider your customer 10 years down the line. This customer wants a green product, socially sustainable and environmentally sustainable. When an Indian labor force, 93% is in the informal sector, it's not socially sustainable. These people are getting under minimum wage, or they are not traceable. Today, you look at the largest global brands, whether it's the Gap, or whether it's M&S, or whether it's Zara, there are huge due diligences going on, right? As a bridge, you cannot miraculously jump to these huge export-oriented units. You can, obviously. You're doing it, she's doing it, that's fantastic. But if you're looking at the growth of a country, you've got to look at the smaller units. You've got to look at the strength of the Indian textile industry has been its informal sector. But in the future, it's going to be its detriment. So that's where we come in, right? We come in and we say, take the middle path, yeah? Aggregate and cluster producers into formal ecosystems which are informal in the sense. They are globally compliant. It's distributed manufacturing. Because in India, we have this huge skilling program going on. But we are seeing just 12% of employment. Because Indians are refusing to migrate. So we bring girls from the villages to be trained. We have all the schemes. They are in dormitories. They learn tailoring. They work for 3 months and they go back to the village. Yeah, so we have to look at the cultural nuances, right? And I think somewhere in that opening presentation on Fashionomics, there was this comment on, is it going to be all about labor or is it also going to be about creativity? I think that's really, really important. So I understand Helen's point of view when she says growth will come from export orientation. But growth is also going to come from domestic orientation.
So what would be your recommendation then for others to follow and
succeed? So the clear recommendation is you've got to take a middle path. And what we have to show the world is that we've built out 100% producer-owned value chains. So there the risks of the informal sector go away. So these people, once they're aggregated, they're able to access finance, they're able to access scale, they're able to supply to global giants like IKEA, right? But they are still in small units. They're still in units of 30, 50. They're not migrated into cities, right? So we look at these distributed manufacturing ecosystems, and they seem to be really successful. We've so far impacted about 30,000 women because we are not asking them to migrate. Yeah, and the access to capital piece becomes really easier here. Because when you are manufacturing for a large customer like IKEA, then it's easier for you to access the capital. But IKEA is going to come in and do huge amount of due diligences. And then you have to be able to handle those. So we have to look at kind of middle paths, I think, for Africa. Yeah? I think everybody on the panel has sort of shown different sides to it. Yeah?
But it appears to me that Helen has actually tackled this already in Ethiopia and Rwanda. Helen, what bold steps do you believe, or the environment, do you think is needed to tackle the main challenges that is facing Africa's textile and fashion industry? How do you think we should be engaging government, for example?
Okay, I would say three things. First of all, let's ask ourselves, why Africa don't have a huge manufacturing, textile and garment industry? Why? Number one, I would say actually there's a bad luck. Why? Actually, in the 80s, Africa do have a manufacturing industry. But then China becoming the manufacturing center of the world. Nobody can compete with China. China built up the most comprehensive supply chain, making the cost most competitive. But today I want to say what I just shared with you, because China is moving up, going to become a high-income country. We should be very optimistic on that. Why? Because that bad luck is going to turn into good luck. And that's why we should have that kind of urgency to grasp this opportunity. This is number one. Number two, why there's no manufacturing in Africa? I would say there's also the bad development ideas. Development ideas actually means a lot. A lot of us forget, in the 1950s and 1960s, in the global development community, actually there's a common consensus. Asia is a hopeless continent. Africa has a much better chance for economic transformation because Africa has rich resource. But what's the result today? Actually, it's all about development ideas. And even talking about in Asia, not all the countries developed at the same time. Japan made its first economic transformation, Asia full tiger followed, and China is really driving it to peak. Let's even compare with India and China. India's economic transformation is great. In the past 30 years, on average, GDP growth has been, on average, 6.3%, developing every year, the growth. But the number, how about the number in China? On average, that number in the past 30 years has been 9.7. But what's the gap between China and India today? Actually, in 1978, the GDP per capita in India is 20% much higher than China. But today, the GDP per capita in China is 5 times more than India. Why? China has been pursued an industrialized development path, but India in the past 30 years has been pursued a service-based development path. So the development ideas really make a huge difference for the country's development. But today, this thing, I still want to say, we should also be optimistic, because today, African leaders, African academics, African professionals, they have been in the front line finding the right idea. People like my good friend Celestine, has been really driving this industrialization in the global front on this. So I'm very optimistic there's going to be this great future for Africa.
But
the last thing I want to say,
Helen, what market-based incentives should governments give out there to promote private sector, investments?
I think this is the traditional idea. People always believe you need to give all those incentives, making sure all those enablers is ready before you can really make a success. But I shared with you early on, Ethiopia is ranked in World Bank doing business report 125, but they were able to make huge changes in the past 6 years. And this is very important for the country. If you want to start your economic transformation, China has this famous quote, what we say, cross the river by touching the stones. Instead, to figuring out all the solution today, you need to really go there to do it. I have been attending forums like this in the past 5 years. Policyholders coming talking about the problem, but that's not really going to solve it. You have to really go to the ground to do it and to experiment. And one of the things, I spent 12 years in Europe, and I graduated from INSEAD, one of the best business schools in Europe. If you ask me to compare the European entrepreneurship and the Chinese entrepreneurship, I would say the following. If you have a tiger in front of you, what I've learned in Western business school is get your laptop, study carefully the characteristic of the tiger, and then decide with your colleagues how are you going to conquer the tiger. But the problem is, when you finish that study, the tiger is gone. But the Chinese entrepreneurship is very different. They have a tiger in front of you, they jump on top the tiger and they ride it. And I think it's very important for Africans to figure out what kind of entrepreneurship and what kind of leader are you. And I think you've got countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, they have already demonstrated the path. And why don't you just follow it and just do it?
Wow, lovely that. I love that. Jumping over the tiger. That brings me to AFDB now, putting them on the spot a little bit. David, you alluded to financing. So what I wanted to ask Nick is, what do you think, or how do you think the AFDB should support this?
Well, first of all, I mean, Helen and I are quite aligned because we are set up industries, so it's very easy to set up a business plan and make something very wonderful, but until you actually do it on the ground and you realize that the electricity stops and your steam throws out all your production schedules and the ladies haven't eaten for lunch and therefore they won't work in the afternoon and all those kind of things, you don't actually understand how those things are going to work. I disagree with Helen from point of view that I think that governments do need to make incentives for investors. I think you need to kickstart the industries. I think where we are, we had a lot of help to make things work. We had subsidized electricity, we had buffer stocks given to us, and we were allowed to bring in foreign workers to be able to train the local workers and things. That's a necessity. I think that when you ask what AFDB can do, I think that all over the world, the textile industry, in all the development that's taken place over all the years, has been supported by World Bank, by IMF, in patient loans. You are not going to make Africa work and have a balance sheet that looks fantastic after 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. You've got to be able to have the patient capital to allow it to make it work. And traditional banks, traditional finance institutions won't take that risk. But the AFDB can take that risk. We have a lot of NGOs that put a lot of money into Africa that ends up going nowhere. If you're putting that money into industries like this that are going to create the myriad of jobs that's sustainable for the future, surely it's worth those financial institutions taking that risk, putting in that patient capital. I have a belief that the proper ingredient is 51% private enterprise, 39% development capital, and 10% government, because I think you have to bring all those people into the mix to make the economic success that you need. I also very much agree regarding the domestic scenario, and I also identify with your comment that you made about African product not being considered quality. The garments that we are making now in Uganda are exported overseas to the finest European buyers. The rejects that the buyers overseas don't take, we find that we are selling in the local market for a better price than we're exporting them overseas. You know, if you look at the per capita growth, per capita consumption of fiber, America consumes 39 kilos per capita of fiber. Europe consumes 25. China consumes 16. India consumes 5.5. Africa consumes 1.5. And most of that 1.5 is second-hand clothing. And there is a growing middle class. There is a growing desire to be identified for your own productivity, your own desire to achieve economic success. So I think there is a huge opportunity in the domestic marketplace in Africa. And if you can achieve the export standards, then you will be able to put those products into the local marketplace of the quality that you can desire and then you can buy of your own accord. So I'm sorry, I've answered the question a very long way, and I apologize.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Before I bring in David, and then before we go to the audience, very quickly, you have highlighted a success story, and that is one of the things that we like. We like to hear success stories so that when we walk away from here, it's not just rhetoric, it's something that we can take away. Your success story is there for us to see. And Southern Africa, for example, we have load shedding. We have all these other challenges, which most investors will not want to come and invest in a country. But we do have a lot of abundant, young labor all across Africa. Would you replicate that? Would you replicate whatever you're doing in other African countries, knowing the challenges fully, that this is there, it exists?
I mean, we've learned so much by what we're doing. You know, the success of Asia in the 70s and 80s was because of the young population. You know, the average age of Africa today is 19. You know, we plan to replicate it in Mozambique, we plan to replicate it in Nigeria, because we see the ability to be able to supply the various parts of the African continent domestically, and we also see the ability to create the export quality product. So yes, absolutely the intention is to replicate it, and we can take everything that we've learned from what we've done and not make as many mistakes the next time, and hopefully we start to get better and better.
Great. Neelam, you wanted to say
No,
something
I just
very
wanted
quickly?
to add to that, yeah. Because right now we are starting a pilot in Ethiopia. Yeah, we're looking at the farm to fashion thing, where we are looking at more value add going to the farmer. So the farmer, and we're looking at also the fact that the Indian industry has grown in the informal sector thanks to handloom, thanks to hand spinning. So there are also many aspects to this. Like globally, there is a demand for handloom. Ethiopia has 1 million handloom weavers, right? So we're looking at a value chain where they're doing micro spinning, where they're doing micro ginning, where the entire value chain is owned by the farmers as well as the weavers, the spinners, the tailors. So you're looking at a very, very transparent value chain. And also coming back to Africa's great hope for the ICT piece. Yeah, because there is this big feeling about Africa that it can actually leap across. It can go straight into the, the tech revolution. So all this can be built on a digital platform. Yeah? And if you look at Bill and Melinda Gates, for example, and I really endorse what you're saying and what you said, that they are in Africa for agri, but they are not in Africa for the textile value chain. So there is actually a lot of, I would say, knowledge that needs to be created about the value of this sector, and bringing on more global donors to this sector is really key, because the whole digital financial inclusion piece, what you said, capital, why are these MFIs being exploded at 24% interest when you have an entire value chain and each person can take a loan on his, and you've got a digitized framework, which is what we're looking at.
Alpha, did you agree with that?
Non, je voulais uniquement ajouter que dans tous les cas, nous avons des problèmes très politiques dans plusieurs pays africains par rapport à la création, par rapport à cette connexion entre les créateurs et les industriels. C'est très important qu'aujourd'hui, on donne la chance, avec des banquiers qui sont intéressés pour financer le domaine de la création, que nous ayons des chaînes de valeur, que nous soyons ensemble, aussi bien des financements que la production, que la communication, que la distribution. C'est des problèmes que nous avons réellement dans notre pays, dans nos pays, et aussi, il ne faut pas oublier les problèmes d'insécurité. Nous avons beaucoup de problèmes d'insécurité dans nos pays, des problèmes de paix. Parce que sans paix, il n'y a pas de développement réel. Nous avons des régions où nous pouvons stopper les problèmes de ce qui se passe actuellement, parce qu'uniquement nous essayons de créer et employer beaucoup de gens par rapport à la mode et par rapport à la création. Je suis certain que si nos politiques nous accompagnent, qu'ils nous suivent, qu'ils écoutent ce que nous disons, nous allons pouvoir stopper et stabiliser nos créateurs et stabiliser aussi nos jeunes pour qu'ils puissent travailler et gagner beaucoup d'argent par rapport à la création. Mais je suis certain que ce que Madame fait au niveau de Rwanda et au niveau aujourd'hui de l'Éthiopie, et avec Vlisco, avec le coton africain et même l'Inde, que nous allons pouvoir avoir des gens sur place qui viennent pour travailler avec nous. On n'est que le créateur. On peut former des créateurs sur place. Mais au niveau de la production, au niveau de l'accompagnement, on a besoin réellement des banques, on a besoin aussi des institutions qui accompagnent par rapport à tout cela. Donc c'est pour ça que c'est très important. Il faut absolument insister sur l'écoute de la paix, mais l'écoute aussi de ces partenaires qui sont extraordinaires et qui le font déjà dans le côté Afrique anglophone. Mais l'Afrique francophone n'a pas beaucoup d'appui. L'Afrique francophone est là. mais quand on voit le Rwanda, on voit aux côtés du Kenya, on voit le Zimbabwe, on voit l'Afrique du Sud, ça évolue très très bien. Mais chez nous, Afrique francophone, il y a encore une ralentie qu'il va absolument amener, alors qu'on est très créatif, on a une imagination extraordinaire, on est aimé et on habille beaucoup plus de monde. Mais c'est une volonté politique, il faut que les politiques soient concernés pour que ça puisse marcher aussi.
Right. I just bring in, because I really want to turn to the audience so I can just get them involved in our conversation. Very, very quickly, David, what kind of support would you like to see from the FDB and other financial institutions? Because everybody's talking about support and, going to the banks and all. So what, they're here. They've got the power to convene. So what support would you like to see from them?
Well, I have to admit I'm completely schizophrenic about incentives. Or maybe I mean hypocritical. So it was suggested to me recently that the Fashionomics, the African Development Bank, could help us with the training of the tailors this year. And I said to my colleagues, I'm not interested. We can do it ourselves. I'm not interested in bureaucracy. I'm not interested in red tape. I'm not interested in waiting around asking somebody else to do something for me. Just do it. That is within our remit. Just do it. What I'm also trying to do, though, is to persuade either Chinese or Indian or Pakistani spinners and weavers who actually work for us now to accompany us to Africa. I say, come with us. We will buy the fabric. Set up a mill for 20 million yards. We will buy it. We're a captive customer looking to buy the fabric. Now, I imagine that part of that conversation, if I manage to advance it, is going to end up talking to external financiers who will actually help us with the finance. So, as I say, I'm schizophrenic or hypocritical. But in terms of what governments can do, we all know what governments can do. We need macroeconomic stability, we need investment in infrastructure, we need energy that won't let you down, as Nick was just saying. We need training and development and education. These are the things that governments need to do before they start talking about incentives.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now an opportunity for you to ask questions. So when the microphone comes through to you, please state your name, keep your comments or your question as brief as possible, and also who you're directing to. I do acknowledge there's a lot of knowledge in this room, so please, to give a chance to all the other participants to ask questions, I beg you, keep your questions very short. Thank you. Could you have the roving microphone, please? When we have an opportunity to present the video, we will. In the meantime, in the interest of time, we will have the questions, please. We have a hand in front here, please.
David Wilcox, Reach Scale. Several of us have traveled thousands of miles to ask a question. So despite the comment, I'm going to take the time to ask the question properly. My vision of riding the tiger looks nothing like your vision of riding the tiger, because what I see is when the tiger landed, the air was so befouled that the tiger couldn't breathe. Those 85 million jobs should never have all been in China. That was a massive mistake built on a massive misunderstanding of how you win. So it's really, really important that we understand what success looks like. The reason this conference is in India and is made up of Indians and Africans is because these cultures have similarities and have a history that makes it possible for them to envision collaboration that would look nothing like the Chinese experience. And I would never, ever recommend exporting the Chinese experience anywhere else in the world. And if we think that the idea here is to do that and to let the economics drive this whole situation, we are out of our minds. What we need is creativity that looks at the real assets and the real values and the real capabilities of millions of women predominantly. It's fine for the designers to be evenly split, but the actual producers are going to be predominantly women. And as Neelam has pointed out, they want to stay where they are. And their governments want them to stay where they are. There's total agreement on this. They don't want them massively moved to other locations to do mass manufacturing. That would be a disaster in India. It's already a disaster in Africa. It's a disaster happening in Africa as we speak. So fashionomics has to be about the creativity of these two areas coming together to envision completely different ways of giving people what they want, which isn't a mass-produced minimum cost product. Those days are gone. That is not what the world wants. You have people on this panel who are capable of doing that, but they're not going to do it with their exact current models. They're going to do it by sitting together and figuring it out. All of you who heard Rima Nanavati talk about how Seva builds their value chains knows that she would be abhorred by the idea of the Chinese experience in Seva. She won't even do the kind of light manufacturing experience because she doesn't like that.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Okay,
Thank
I will
you.
wrap up.
Thank you.
So I would love to hear the comments of particularly Neelam, but others, about how we collaborate to actually leverage the real talent of the people in the villages and in the countries who need to be paid for their work, who need a model like Amul in India, where you have a $3 billion company where all of the money flows to the farmers and a small manufacturing core. And none of the money flows to the financiers.
Thank you. We have a hand in front here from the lady. What we'll do is we'll take 2 questions at a time and then we can answer.
You want me to stand up?
Yes, please. Please do stand up, state your name and the question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Renu Modi. I teach Center for African Studies, University of Mumbai. We have been doing research and actually making a book and a small little educational film on the export of Indian textiles to Africa. All the time
May I kindly ask you to speak slowly? Thank you.
We are working on a book which is documenting the manufacturing of textiles in India for export to Africa. So there's always talk of Lisco, wooden, China, mass-producing fabrics for Africa, but actually just 300 kilometers from this place, there is a small town called Jetpur, which is exporting fabrics to Africa, the Kanga, Kitenge, the Adinkra prints. You'll be surprised to see if you enter those factories, you feel as if you're in Africa. And I want to know that there's a talk about manufacturing in Africa, but like Rivertex produced in Kenya a while ago. I was in Mombasa as a part of my research project. So they tell me that never will the textile industry grow in Tanzania, in Kenya, or many other countries because of the lack of support that they have. So I do not agree with Helen. There has to be an enabling environment. And I never understand why, like one country like Tanzania, which is producing textiles for itself and exporting, manages to do so. The neighboring Kenya doesn't manage to do so. Rwanda is an example just contrary to what you are saying. It is a very highly enabled business environment. That is why manufacturing is happening. So I want you to take note of all the fabrics that are being made in India for export to Africa, for which there is so little publicity. And people in Africa themselves do not know about this.
Thank you. More of a contribution as well. Could we have the gentleman in front there, please?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mamadou Goïta, je viens du Mali, donc j'adresse ma question au frère Alfadi et puis à Pateo. Juste pour demander, en 1998, j'avais fait une recherche et une publication sur l'intégration économique de l'Afrique de l'Ouest par le coton. Donc il parlait un peu des opportunités entre le Mali et le Burkina Faso, non seulement d'utiliser les opportunités d'industrialisation à travers le coton, parce qu'à l'époque, le Mali, qui était le premier producteur de coton en Afrique, transformait 1,8% de son coton, et le Burkina était à 0,63%, si je ne me trompe. Et donc, comment est-ce que vous voyez le rôle et la place que les créateurs peuvent jouer dans la reprise d'une telle initiative d'intégration économique de l'Afrique de l'Ouest à travers le coton, donc dans la créativité vers l'industrialisation, parce que c'était un élément fédérateur extrêmement important et qui a été longuement oublié. Quel rôle vous pouvez jouer dans l'incitation des États à réinvestir des ressources pour que cette création de richesses puisse être réinvestie sur le continent et dans les pays? Parce qu'il y a des modèles extravertis que nous voyons aujourd'hui, où il y a une réexportation de la richesse et de l'emploi autour du coton qui s'est fait ailleurs. Et les producteurs, hommes et femmes, avec lesquels nous travaillons, sont complètement mis en rade par rapport à ce système-là. Quel rôle vous pouvez jouer en tant que créateur pour que les États puissent finalement prendre conscience que la richesse qui est créée à l'intérieur des États et des régions doit être réinvestie justement pour amener cette transformation de l'économie africaine?
Thank you. I think we'll take the answers. If we could start with you, Helen. There was a comment from the gentleman up front here that we shouldn't take on the Chinese model. And I think you could probably even answer the question from the lady, because I think both were more directed to you.
Yeah, I think Nelson Mandela once said, it's always impossible until it's done. And I think actually the history will tell who's right and who's wrong. That's the number one point I want to make. And secondly, I think today is, and actually I didn't tell you why did I came to Ethiopia. Ethiopia ranked 125 by doing business report. Actually, I was invited by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. The story started in March 2011, when the late Prime Minister of Ethiopia met Professor Justin Lin, the former chief economist of the World Bank, and he asked Justin's advice in terms of poverty reduction and economic transformation. Justin told him three things. Number one, he said, for poverty reduction, job creation, it is the most important thing. Secondly, the fundamental secret for economic transformation in Asia for tigers and China is because they all capture the window of opportunity during industrialization relocation. And now there's about 85 million jobs relocating out of China. At that moment, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia immediately grasped the idea. He said, I want my country to be the pioneer of this in Africa. So tell me how am I going to do it? So the Latin professor said to him, in order to do it, you need to start with a quick, successful examples. Because of quick, successful examples will bring inspiration, leadership, confidence, and experience to your country and to the continent. That is how the story started. The Prime Minister himself personally went to China, invited me to go to Ethiopia. And I didn't also pick up Rwanda. It was the President Kagame invited me to go to Rwanda. So the thing I wanted to say actually is up to Africans. It's your development path. It's your choice which path you want to take. But you will be judged by the history. Do you want your youth in the next 10 years become in the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, or you want to create millions of decent jobs for them, taking the advantage of this relocation? Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. She's David. Actually, Nick, there was a comment. She talked about jobs, and then there was also a comment about investing resources. Producers are being sidelined. You in the industry of producing, the comment really was about producers not having any value, really. He wants tangible wealth creation.
I mean, you're talking about Burkina Faso and Mali, which are the two largest producers of cotton in the whole of Africa. But the truth is, it's much harder to develop those industries in Francophone Africa than it is in Anglophone Africa. And I can't explain why.
I was going to ask you why.
But the truth is, first of all, the electricity is extremely expensive. Secondly, the populations are almost entirely rural.
Cheap labor, I see there.
Sorry?
Cheap labor, I see.
Cheap labor, but also uneducated labor. So if you look at a lot of the Anglophone countries or a lot of East African countries, they're very well educated people. I mean, we're employing a lot of graduates in our factory at the moment, and the wages are extremely competitive. But these people are very, very intelligent people. They understand what they're trying to do, and I don't think that you have that kind of spectrum in Francophone Africa, and that's when you start to bring in the linkages. You want to bring in the linkages of Mali and Burkina Faso and people into the other African countries. Nigeria has the capability of building a textile industry again. Nigeria has the capability of building a huge textile industry. And the Kano market is the possibility to be able to deliver a lot of Central African garments and everything out there. So maybe there's some linkages that can be made between Burkina Faso and Mali into the Nigerian market that then can deliver the cotton into the whole supply chain and create what's necessary. I mean, I think it's just going to take time to build those kind. But there's definitely Anglophone Africa is an easier place to build a textile industry. I would just like to say that, I mean, it's just an aside, that I think that the textile industry is an enormously entrepreneurial industry. It has huge industries, it has tiny industries, it has all sorts of offshoots of everything. And I think there is a place for everyone. And I don't think that there is any need to say this people did this or these people did this. I think there is a place for everyone here, and there is an opportunity to really create something very special. And I see the expertise that's in China, enormous expertise, phenomenal. What they've achieved.
I like what you say, just to cut you short, because I want to get back to the audience. I love what you say, that there's space for everyone. It just reminds me of what President Adesina had once said, I think it was in Lusaka when I was moderating there, where he says he doesn't want to see Africa being a museum for poverty. The idea is to create jobs. Could we have more questions, please? We have the young lady there, and we have a gentleman. Oh yes, please, Alfadi, you can respond.
Il avait posé des questions.
Please respond.
Voilà, je voulais quand même répondre au monsieur par rapport à la création au niveau du textile. Le monsieur a parlé tout à l'heure par rapport aux pays francophones et aux pays anglophones. Quand il parle de pays anglophones qui sont très près à la production, à la productivité, les pays francophones, on est plus forts au niveau de la création. Création, design, au niveau des modèles même. Mais uniquement, c'est vrai que les pays anglophones sont encore allés beaucoup plus loin au niveau de la production, au niveau de la productivité de ce qu'ils vont en usine ou en textile. Mais au niveau du Mali et au niveau du Burkina Faso par rapport au coton, pour stabiliser le coton malien ou le coton burkinabé, je toujours dis au gouvernement du Mali ou du Niger de garder au moins 25 à 30%, que nous, créatifs, on puisse le travailler, le mobiliser en teinture, en travail, mais ça n'a jamais été le cas. Et je crois qu'au Burkina Faso, ça va y commencer et c'est en train de revenir encore aujourd'hui au Burkina Faso parce que le Burkinabé y croit. Le Mali, cette tension, comme je vous ai dit, de guerre ou d'histoire de rébellion ou d'histoire d'insécurité ne permet pas d'aller jusqu'au fond des problèmes. Mais les politiques, comme Madame a dit aussi, c'est eux. Il faut absolument qu'on prenne le bœuf par les cornes. Les politiques doivent donner leur engagement. Ils doivent accompagner les industries culturelles de la mode et du design pour qu'on puisse absolument garder et créer de l'emploi par rapport au textile africain. J'en suis certain. S'ils mettent le paquet, on est prêt à accompagner pour dessiner, travailler, pour qu'on puisse œuvrer dans ce côté-là. Je suis certain qu'on peut le faire. Absolument.
Je crois que le vrai problème que nous avons ici en Afrique, en tout cas en Afrique de l'Ouest, le vrai problème, c'est que la matière elle-même, nous sommes les producteurs, bien sûr, de meilleur coton au monde. Mais ce coton, il n'est pas là. Dès la quête, le coton est parti. Dites-moi dans quel marché africain, en Afrique de l'Ouest, vous pouvez avoir même 1 mètre de 100% coton, on ne l'a pas. On n'a pas la matière. Alors on ne peut pas aussi faire travailler ce coton de l'extérieur et le ramener nous vendre à un prix qui peut être compétitif. C'est impossible. Et puis aussi, il faut savoir que les États n'ont pas encore pris conscience que l'industrie de la mode est réelle. C'est-à-dire, pour le moment, on pense que la mode, c'est vraiment les autres. Quand on veut s'habiller, on va s'habiller ailleurs. On revient en Afrique. On ne pense pas que l'Afrique aussi peut habiller l'Afrique. C'est ça aussi un des problèmes. C'est un des gros problèmes. Donc, il faudrait que les gens sachent que la production de coton, il faut que ça soit transformé par les Africains et consommé par les Africains. Et ensuite, le surplus, on peut le vendre ailleurs. En tout cas, moi, c'est ma conception.
And that's exactly what Nick is doing. Thank you. That's exactly what Nick is doing in Uganda, where he's actually planting the seed, growing it, processing it, and you have a finished garment there, isn't it? Yes. great. Could we have the question from the young lady? We had a gentleman here up front.
Okay, so I have two questions. The first one is for Helen.
Your name?
My name is Miriam Carius, and I'm a lawyer in banking and finance.
Thank you.
So my first question is to Helen. So you mentioned earlier that as a result of your initiative in Ethiopia, so there will be a transfer of jobs from China to Ethiopia. So for me, now I'm wondering what would be the interest of China to transfer jobs from China to Africa. It means that some people in China might be out of job. And for me, the interest is for, as an African, to make sure that we have a win-win partnership. So I want to understand the intention of China and the interest of China of transferring jobs from China to Africa. And the other question is for the gentleman about the difficulty of doing business in Francophone Africa. And I have to be honest, I'm a bit surprised by the reason, the lack of education, etc. Because as a lawyer, and I'm from Ivory Coast, I advise non-Francophone companies investing in Francophone Africa. And I heard a lot of reasons for the reason why they have this perception that it's more difficult to do business in Francophone Africa. And I would like to know whether you have any kind of statistics to back the statement that you made about the fact that maybe people live in rural area, or there is more of a lack of education in Francophone Africa than elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have the microphone up front here, please? We need the microphone in front here. Thank you.
મારું નામ પૂરીબેન ગામ ભવા તાલુકો હતપણ જિલ્લો પાટણ એક હું ભરતની કારીગર બેન છું અને હું 27 વર્ષ જોડાલ છું. તમે તમારી કંપનીની તમારા કામની રજૂઆત કરી, હવે અમારી કંપનીનું રજૂઆત કરું છું. મારે થોડુંક બોલવું છે. તો ઈલાબેન ભટ્ટ, રેમાબેન નાણાવટી એ સંસ્થામાં અમે જોડાલ છીએ, સવાશ્રી મહિલા સેવા સંઘ. તો અમારે કંપની બનાવેલ છે. અમે કાચા માલથી પાકા માલ સુધી કામ કરીએ છીએ. અમે અભણ બેનું છીએ અને અમે કારીગર બેનું છીએ. તો અમારા દેશમાં વારંવાર દકાર અને અમારે કોઈ પાણીની અમારો કોઈ વિકાસ નહોતો. તો અમારી કારીગરીની માર્કેટની ખબર નહોતી. તો અમે તાલીંગો બેનને દઈએ છીએ, કારીગર બેનું, અને અમે અમારું કામ કરીએ છીએ. અને અમારી દેહોદેહ કંપની બધી હોય છે, પણ અમારી કંપની ગરીબ બેનને નામે કંપની છે અને અમે શેર હોલ્ડરના સભ્ય છીએ. 7,000 બેનું મારી કંપની.
Thank you. Shall I assume that Neelam, you're going to interpret for us?
I can do that.
She's going to interpret.
Okay. Please be very brief with the interpretation.
Yeah. She's Puribin, coming from Patan district in Gujarat, and she herself is an artisan woman. And she's saying she's member of SEVA, and in her area, farming
What is SEVA? Who is SEVA?
Self-Employed Women's Association, SEVA,
right?
An organization. And here in their area, the frequent droughts come, and we ourselves are embroidery workers. We did not value our art, but it is now that today we are shareholders of our own company, which is Seva Trade Facilitation Center. We work from making the raw material to the finished product and in the entire value chain, and we have our own brand called Hansiba for our own products.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
And she herself is illiterate.
I just wanted to ask, are you educated or not educated?
They are illiterate women.
Illiterate, okay. Well, thank you so much. I just love your zeal, coming all the way to come and pitch. That's a very nice way of pitching for a job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Neelam, I hope you've taken notes.
So it's the skill building that helped us, helped her become shareholder.
That's the point I've been trying to make. Yeah, India is a land of self-ownership, right? We've got Gandhi. behind us, right? The way Africa has Mandela behind them, right? So we really believe, I mean, look at Amul, it's at $4 billion. It's owned by farmers. Why can't we have a textile value chain in India which gets to $4 billion? Owned by farmers. Why can't we have a textile value chain in Africa? Owned by farmers. So these are all just, so we are from the land of Mandela and Gandhi. And so it's our job to do alternate pilots, and we'll do them. So I appeal to the African Development Bank. They really need to look at all sorts of models. Exactly what Nick said. There's room for everything and everyone.
That's the reason why we're all here, so we can
Exactly,
come up
yeah.
with solutions.
Yes.
Could we have do you have your microphone?
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. My name is Guillaume Habarugira, and I'm an African citizen. Before I ask my questions, I need to disagree with this gentleman on whatever he said on the Chinese model. I'm an African. I have friends working for Mrs. Helen. I can tell you their life went better. You cannot say, as an African, you cannot say that we don't need to replicate that. It's your opinion, I have my opinion, and it just needs to be expressed. That being said, my question will go to Mr. Nick Olam. I think you're the one who said that, that you need slow capital, right?
Patient capital.
Yeah, patient
capital.
Patient capital. What do you think needs to be done, and by whom? And not only talking about the African Development Bank, but if it was not those DFI, what do you think would help having that kind of patience? That's my question number one. My question number two.
Number 1 point.
No,
1 point.
Not 1 point. My other question goes to Mrs. Helen. You said that people need to ride the tiger. Right, I understand they could ride the tiger. You were invited by the Prime Minister. Right, not everyone is going to have such access. What do you tell small people needing to go forward? How are they going to ride the tiger? Thank you, that's all.
All right, so I think what we'll do in concluding, because we really have run out of time, I will allow Helen to answer the question of transferring jobs from China to Africa. Why should we? And also, not everyone has access to the Prime Minister.
Yeah. So first of all, China is not taking the driving seat, transferring this job from China to Africa. Actually, as I said, it's African taking this driving seat, go to China saying, transfer the job to me. Because actually those jobs has a lot of places to go. You know, they can go Southeast Asia, they can go many places. And as I said in the history, in the 60s, when Asia started the economic transformation, not all the countries take advantage of that. Japan is the first, only one country in the 60s taking advantage. And then Asia for Tiger. This round of relocation, not all the African countries are going to be able to have the same opportunity. Why? Because not all the leaders are going to have the same vision. What I have witnessed in the past 6 years, some countries, one of them is Ethiopia and Rwanda and also Senegal following, they have that vision and they actually actively go to China. They are in the driving seat going to China saying, come to please to transfer those jobs to me. So that is, we have to understand first, who's taking the driving seat. And secondly, your question, what's in it for China? So China, first of all, we were very poor. As I said, in the year I was born, China is much poorer than you. But then we realized China has been experiencing double-digit growth in the past 30 years. That growth cannot forever. So now we only have 6% growth every year. But the question is, the domestic demand is limited. So, but actually the thing is, if we can help Africa to create the next huge population of middle class, That's a great news for China, because when they all becoming middle class, they will purchase things, and that can help China's economy to grow. It's like China now is contributing 33% of the global annual growth. So actually, talking about SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, leaving no one behind, the real growth for everybody in this room is actually helping those people has been left behind, helping them becoming middle class. That's actually helping all of us in the world to grow. So that's the way I answer your question, is to leaving no one behind.
This conversation, ladies and gentlemen, can continue with our members of the panel, because I know that we are really running out of time, because I want them to give concluding remarks. And also just to let you know, if there are any members of the press, please, you can have a conversation with members of the panel, one-on-one sessions. Giving concluding remarks, David, could you, Nick rather, sorry, could you please respond to the question of statistics to support your claim, in inverted commas, of illiteracy, why we can't have production in some of these English-speaking countries, so to say, as you give your concluding remarks?
So I can't give you the statistics as it stands right now. I mean, Mali is a country with 14 million people, of which 7 million people in that industry are employed in the cotton industry. Francophone Africa has been largely...
Could you use the microphone, Nick? Thank you. I know we're having challenges today. Thank you.
I can't give you all the statistics today. I've been heavily involved in the cotton trade for many years, since the early, it's the late 70s. Mali is a country that has a 14 million population, and 7 million people of those are employed in or around the cotton industry. It has largely been state-controlled, and there has been very little opportunity to develop private enterprise in those countries. It wasn't meant to be a situation where I was saying it couldn't be done. It just seems to be a situation over a period of time where it's much more difficult to develop it in the Francophone countries. Every textile industry that I've ever seen in the Francophone countries has pretty much failed. And it's been involved with the state. And I know that the electricity cost is incredibly expensive. I mean, Helen is talking about Ethiopia, it's 3.5 cents a kilowatt. In Francophone Africa, it's 13 cents a kilowatt. And in Uganda, where we are at the moment, we're having 5 cents a kilowatt. So there's a huge difference in those kind of scenarios. So maybe it can be, but at the moment it seems to be more difficult than in some of the Anglophone countries.
Thank you for clarifying that. David, can I rope you in as you give your concluding remarks?
I find working in the Ivory Coast a lot easier than in Ghana, where the electricity prices are much higher. I think it's a false debate. China, of course the Chinese model will not be exported to Africa. How can it possibly be? With a different political regime, a different country, a completely different set of circumstances. There's no way the Chinese model will be used in Africa. But you are wrong to say, in my view, that economics shouldn't drive this. Economics will drive this, and economics should drive it. So I don't agree with you there. And I also, Helen, I'm not sure I entirely agree with you either. I think the Chinese government is actually actively trying to move industrialization up and away from textiles to higher added value industries. I think the China government sees that commodity textiles should go somewhere else. Now, I remember Japan, you don't, I remember Japan when Japan was given no chance of success because it had no raw materials and had to import everything. And when Japan started its industrialization, made in Japan meant it has been copied from somewhere else. And I think that Africa has got two things which are different, because Issey Miyake wasn't around in those days. Issey Miyake came later. But I think when the textile industry comes to Africa, which it will have two things different from all those other regions and countries whose economies develop through textiles. The first thing it will have is a phenomenal design and creative infrastructure and talent that exists already. And the second thing it will have is the most amazing women and dynamic entrepreneurs. I see that with Frisco. I have never known a more women-centric business. Frisco only exists because of the dynamism and the creativity of African women.
Thank you for acknowledging that, David. Thank you. Neelam, as you conclude, your concluding remarks, please.
Well, it's been a very interesting debate, and I think I completely endorse what David said. I think about the creativity aspect, and that's where Africa is going to take the, I mean, if you look at the West Indies, what is the biggest contribution to the West Indies GDP? Anybody know? Reggae. It's a 26% contribution to their GDP, their music. So that's what I think is in store for Africa. And I don't think Africa is going to be the textile commodity producer on the planet. No, it's going to get into niche textiles. And it is, I think it is going to happen. Yeah, so I think that's my concluding remark, yeah.
Thank you. Monsieur Patois, conclusion?
Bon, ma conclusion, c'est que je pense réellement que si nous voulons créer cette industrie textile en Afrique, il y a deux choses, sinon trois choses principales. Il faut d'abord la formation. Il faut obligatoirement former les gens.
Oui.
Si les gens sont bien formés, ensuite, il faut aussi la matière. Parce qu'il y a les gens formés, mais il faut travailler. Et travailler comment? Il faut avoir la structure du travail. Des machines modernes, des techniciens qui vont enseigner les gens comment travailler sur ces machines. Ensuite, maintenant, la matière. Je suis sûr que si le coton est transformé, même à 30% en Afrique, il y aura de l'emploi pour les Africains. Et je pense que nous ne pouvons pas être les meilleurs producteurs de coton. Et puis ne même pas avoir ce coton-là, 1% transformé. C'est irréel, ce n'est pas possible. C'est comme si on a annoncé notre mort, alors pillons vite l'Afrique et allons-y. Ce n'est pas possible. Il faut que nous arrivions à travailler, à former les gens et à utiliser la matière que nous produisons. Et ensuite, ça va être bénéfique pour tous les Africains. Surtout ceux qui sont vulnérables, c'est que les enfants, les femmes. C'est incroyable. La mode, c'est quoi? Le développement de la mode, si vous voulez former un piqueur, en 3 mois, vous pouvez former quelqu'un qui sait piquer. Donc il y a tellement de jeunes qui n'ont pas d'emploi en Afrique. En transformant les matières en Afrique, il y aurait de l'emploi pour tout le monde. Moi, je suis certain que ça dépendra toujours aussi des gouvernants qui prennent des décisions pour voir ce qui c'est que la possibilité, quelle possibilité ils auront à faire travailler tous ces Africains-là qui n'ont pas d'emploi. Alors qu'il en faudra obligatoirement. Merci.
Thank you. Monsieur Alfadi, we're making our concluding remarks, because if I could allow you to just make yours very short.
Thank you so much. Yeah, of course. Je suis très content. Yes. Je voulais absolument remercier la BAD. Ma conclusion est que la BAD doit continuer à œuvrer dans ce sens. C'est un premier pas, c'est une belle histoire entre créateurs, entre industriels, entre développement, que l'Afrique commence aujourd'hui à comprendre que c'est une partie de l'Afrique. Lutter contre la pauvreté, mourir en mer, empêcher, comme Madame a dit tout à l'heure, à nos enfants qui partent chercher de l'emploi. Nous pouvons créer 1 million, 2 millions, 10 millions d'emplois sur le continent africain par rapport à la création et par rapport à la mode. Si on lui donne sa valeur, si les banques suivent et si les politiques suivent. C'est la banque seulement qui peut forcer les politiciens à comprendre l'intérêt de la création. Donc vraiment, je suis sur un panel incroyable qui sont là, du textile aux développeurs, aux producteurs, à l'image du textile, à l'image des créateurs africains. C'est une belle histoire qui commence avec la BAD. Je crois réellement, on est partant et on est certain qu'on peut le faire. Pathé a parlé de quelque chose de très important, l'éducation. L'éducation est une chose qu'on n'a pas chez nous, que la Chine a chez eux, que d'autres ont chez eux. Mais sur le continent, on a besoin d'avoir de très bonnes universités, de très bonnes écoles qui uniquement forment les petites mains par rapport à la productivité que les Chinois, que d'autres peuvent encourager et prendre sur place. Donc c'est une manière d'amener l'Afrique très loin et aussi donner une dignité aux marques. Parce que quand on vend des vêtements, on les vend, d'accord, mais il faut aussi développer l'image de la création et des créateurs. Les créateurs n'est pas que Pathé Alfadi. Il y a des cinquantaines, des centaines de créateurs africains qui sont là, qui vivent, qui veulent être des créateurs de demain, qui veulent être Chanel, Christian Lacroix, mais pour le continent africain. Donc je crois que l'Afrique a besoin d'être soutenue. Le Nigeria l'a commencé parce qu'on parle souvent du Nigeria, c'est extraordinaire. Et pourquoi pas ne pas parler du Togo, du Bénin, de la Côte d'Ivoire, par rapport à cette industrie de produire le textile localement et de produire aussi des vêtements localement avec des noms de créateurs connus. Je vous remercie. En tout cas, merci pour la BAD encore.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this panel discussion. Really, I want to thank you, the audience, for your attention and for your participation and for your comments as well as questions. I want to thank the panel for their time and really for speaking candidly. The idea here was to see how we can create wealth through fashionomics. I know that when we talk about fashion, everybody's, it's like in the abstracts. So just to qualify that, we will be having a fashion show later tonight at the University of Gujarat at the Convention Center at 7 p.m., where we'll be able to showcase and actually see tangible products of our designers here, our renowned designers, Patheo as well as Alpha D. And also, ladies and gentlemen, I think what has really come out here is that the dots are there. We need to connect them. Everybody has a place in this wealth creation. It's not just for us to work in silos or to work in isolation, and also to see how all these success stories can be interpreted in Africa. The idea is to create wealth and to create jobs for Africans so that we can just be a better place. And like I said earlier, we're not a museum for poverty. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Have a pleasant stay here in India. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much, you. Merci. You are a very big professional.
African fashion seemed so popular across the world, and yet it was so difficult for people to be able to access beautiful contemporary African fashion made by African designers, made on the African continent. So I started to look at some of the challenges that was making it more difficult for African designers and locally made African creative products to find their way to the international market. We have challenges with lack of locally produced fabric.
Africa produce almost everything in terms of raw materials for textile and the cotton and the garment industry. And this is very important. When you go around, you see the African capacity production in cotton, a whole industry to produce even such kind of fabric.
We also have challenges with production facilities.
Creating contemporary fashion in Africa, I think, is intimately tied to the question of producing at scale.
We are certainly going to shift more and more to large-scale manufacturing to achieve economies of scale, but at the same time, organizing the production on a chain.
For a company or a brand to stay longer at the markets, it needs to be competitive. And competitiveness is not only about price, it's also about that quality.
To serve the international market, African designers need access to world-class production facilities that make great quality garments.
Around a new wave of African designers and producers really integrating an understanding of the contemporary needs of modern customers, both in Africa and in the broader world, with a real understanding of the production and value chain of the fashion industry.
The other challenges revolve around distribution. How do you get fabric that is made in Ghana, manufactured in South Africa or Rwanda into a garment and sold in Australia, the United Kingdom, or the United States?
In the network of distributors, all these are things that we need to work out for us to sustain it, to make sure we are competitive.
There are many benefits to having a strong local fashion industry here in Africa.